Now, to provide an economic review of the current surge in food prices and analyze the latest GDP figures released by the National Bureau of Statistics, with emphasis on inflationary pressures and, of course, household spending and welfare, we're joined by Paul Alaje, an economist, and the man with that library behind him. I was just curious to ask if he has read all those books we saw behind him, and he said yes.
Yeah.
Well done.
Amazing.
So you are in the best position to break it down beyond the figures of the MBS. The MBS saying that the GDP grew but dropped below what we had previously, which is now 3.9 something percent. I want us to break it down tonight. When President Bola Tinubu says his tough reforms are beginning to yield results of a stable economy, and then our correspondent goes to the market and sees that there are a lot of rams, but not a lot of people are buying because they can't buy. Where is that stable economy? What's the difference in what the government is saying and what we're seeing on the ground? Why is that, that disparity?
Yeah, thank you so very much. We'll start first with the current inflation numbers. The Bureau of Statistics has released inflation number. The month-on-month inflation number for March was above 4%. The one for April was above 2%. What MBS is telling us is that on month alone, very short period of time, inflation is raising. When people saw that inflation went to 15.69% thereabout, what MBS is saying that when you compare average price this year, when you compare with last year, it increased. Again, when we talk about GDP growth rate, GDP grew but at a slower rate. Not that we had a recession, or we had a lower GDP number, so it's not negative. Now, ordinarily, because prices are increasing, the GDP measure, total monetary value, the exchange hand, over a period of time, the total monetary value of goods and services, what you bought over a period of time. Prices are increased, so it will reflect in your GDP numbers. But we would have the number would have been much higher than that if inflation were to be lower. Because to get the real GDP, you have to divide the nominal GDP by inflation. As inflation increases, it means the denominator is higher. When the denominator is higher, your end result will, of course, be lower. So this is why we have reduced GDP. And that is why it's important for us to know that inflation matters. And how we tackle it also matters. From the report, which, of course, corroborated what the numbers we have picked on the street, to move a trailer, load of goods, say, from Kano to Abuja, this time last year, it was 900. Today, the price is between 1,300 to 1,500. Why? Because of global economic pressures, because of external shocks, because of negative externalities. Nigeria is not at war with any country, but the countries that are at war, they matter. Over 10 to 15% of global commodity pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So until we resolve that, and there's confidence, so that of course will bring future expectation in rising price. So the president is saying, we have to a large extent been able to bring economic stability. What does that mean to us in economics? It does not mean everything is stable. It doesn't mean everything is not stable. We look more at the parameter. The first parameter is inflation. Is inflation stable? Can we say that now inflation, this rate it should be for Nigeria, it should be single digit, and that single digit is 6 to 9%. Now, for rebased inflation, you should be looking at more lower figure, which is between 3 to 6%. Nigeria, according to the Bureau of Statistics, not my figure, is 15.69%. Compared to where we were before we rebased inflation, I think near 40%, if not up to 40%. Then you look at unemployment. We are using 1 hour a week, not 40 hours a week. Your work suggests that you work for 8 hours in a day, and that you multiply that by 5 is 40 hours. But to follow what ILO and other international organizations have said, and so that we be globally compliant, for most part of the world, what they are using now is 1 hour a week. Nigeria also joined, and that crashing unemployment for what we were using before, which was 20 hours a week to 1 hour a week. At 20 hours a week, we had as high as 33% of the labor force. Today, what we have is around 4%. Now, what is the parameter, standard of gauge is what we should be looking at. What is the minimum requirement? It should be 2 to 3%. Nigeria is more than double of what it should be. So when the economy says that unemployment is 4%, you ask, what should it be? For instance, when you say that Nigeria debt to GDP is okay, no, you say, okay, I hear you, but what should it be? Debt service to revenue is okay, you say, what should it be? So what we look at is, this is where we are, but where should we be, as an economy? So that when you look at our GDP, the president made major commitment when he was coming to office that this economy, and also at the central bank governor, the government is doing everything possible to make Nigeria a $1 trillion economy. That is huge. That is desirable. That is what all Nigerians should look forward to. But for us to get there, can we get there with 3% and 4% GDP growth rate?
If you let me come in here,
you know what we need to do?
I would actually like
17% GDP growth rate. And we need to do that for about 7 to 10 years. We're not doing 10, we're not doing 8, we're not doing 6. We're doing 3 to 5%, which means we need to do more. We need to invigorate this economy. Something about the method we are using now, which is not bad. You know, economy have different shapes, have different school of thought. We are practicing a market system. For market system, what you need the most is capital. So cost of capital with the banks, they must cooperate with central bank and indeed the federal government.
Right.
Now, when they cooperate, people will have access to credits. And you remember, President gave that example. You know that the president, what he's doing, he already has his intention. He said, he talked to the bankers, private sector in Lagos. He said, you don't have to use your money to buy a house. What you need to do is to get credit.
Right.
Now, do we have access to that credit?
Well, he said
one of the major underlining factor
no.
why all the work government is doing seems not to be reflected. Until we get credit correct and people have access to capital. When you have access to capital, you're going to see major growth that I want to see on this economy.
Excellent. Now, in looking at this further, you realize that the non-oil sector actually contributed about 96.08% to the real GDP growth. And the oil sector, barely 3-point-something%. Please help us understand why and what does it mean in terms of where our real focus should be.
Now, the lopsidedness has been like this for as long as I can remember, for as long as I started practicing as an economist, and that's over 2 decades now.
Right.
I tell you, the oil sector, what is contributing to GDP, that's how our economy participates. So what is not in oil is we can account for over 90%.
Right.
Oil is contributing less to the GDP, but how does that matter? It matters because what is giving us FX? Our FX come from oil. What is giving us major revenue? Revenue comes from oil. But what is contributing is less. And people will say, oh, FIRS is not doing enough. They are, because the contribution to the GDP is this. Unfortunately, what gives us revenue is not. So you see the lopsidedness. And that is why this will not change until we stop focusing only on federal government. We have to focus on local government. You see, Nigeria will be a great country the moment we know that our economic miracle lies at the grassroots. That's where the real people are. We need to change the focus. Our local government will also have transparent books to see what surplus do they have, to see how many people get engaged, where is production happening. If this is not happening, I tell you, you know what, but local government will not function, even say we not function well, if the fundamentals for development and growth, they are not there. Number one is energy. If you don't have energy, I will not be on this show talking this evening. For those watching me now in their respective homes, on YouTube, anywhere you're watching us from, if there is no energy in your mind, in your body, you can't watch. So an economy that lacks energy, honestly, cannot do much. So you look at our energy, and that can be divided into two. What is happening to cost of fuel? What is happening to cost of energy? Even the availability. As a nation, we don't need anything less than 50,000 megawatts. But do we have up to 10% of that? That is one. Two, security. A country that is not secure, honestly, is going to have major impact. I'm not saying that the entire Nigeria should become secure overnight, but I am saying that we need to secure. And the news about insecurity in Nigeria is already affecting investment. Thankfully, we have a president that said he's been going around to bring investment to Nigeria. Positive news mentioned for us all over the world. But we now need to come to work with that with some institutional challenge. There are about 12 of major pillars that we make local government to function. One of them, before I go rather very quick, is what we're about to do next year, which is election. It must be transparent. It must be seen from primaries. There must be internal democracy. When all of this happen, then there will be confidence in investors, not just foreign investors, even Nigeria, to say our country is going back to the path of growth. But remember, the most important is local government.
Okay, well, NISA, Institute of Social Economic Research, says it actually predicts 5.02% GDP growth and single-digit inflation by 2028. I wonder if you're that optimistic, and what should be the basis of that. We have to say thank you very much. We're being played out. Thank you, Paul Alaje.